Ever get that feeling that the whole financial system is a game and maybe you don't know all the rules? Well, today we're not just going to explore those rules. We're going to ask a really basic question. Is the game itself even fair? And then we'll get into a blueprint for how we might build a better one.
All right, so let's just start with a gut check here. I mean, when you see the news about market crashes, massive bailouts, how does it actually make you feel? Does it feel fair to you? That feeling you get. That's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Wow, this quote, it really says it all, doesn't it? Rescuing markets is fast, cleaning up fraud is slow or never happens. I mean, that just perfectly captures that nagging feeling, right? That when a crisis hits, the number one priority is saving the market itself, not actually holding anyone accountable. It's exactly why so many of us feel like the whole game might just be rigged. Okay, so this brings us to our first big idea here, the unfair money game. It's basically just a name for that pattern we were just talking about. A system where the profits are kept private, but the losses, well, the losses, they get pushed onto everyone. So here's the absolute core of the problem. When these huge financial players make these massive bets and they go wrong, they don't always foot the bill. Instead, those losses get kind of quietly passed on to the rest of us. And you feel it, right? You feel it as inflation when your money just doesn't stretch as far at the grocery store. You see it when your paycheck just can't keep up with prices. It's like a hidden tax on everything you save. So to really get how this all connects, we've got to understand something that, honestly, most people have no idea about. And that's money itself. Like, where does it actually come from? We all have this image of governments printing it, right? But the reality, most money is created, literally out of thin air, by banks when they approve a loan. Think about it. When someone gets a mortgage, the bank just types some numbers into their account and poof, that's brand new money in the system. And this is a huge deal because it means our entire economy is basically built on this cycle of debt. All right, so if all this money is tied to debt, that creates a very specific kind of dynamic. Let's walk through how this whole boom and bust thing really plays out, step by step. What's really wild is how this cycle just keeps repeating itself, almost like clockwork. First up, you've got the boom. This is when cheap money fuels a total frenzy, asset prices go through the roof, and yeah, a select few get really, really rich. But that always leads to misallocation. Bad ideas start getting funded because money's so easy to come by. And then, bam, the whole thing comes crashing down in a crisis. And that's when the last step kicks in, intervention. That's the fancy word for when the public is forced to foot the bill to save the system. It is the same story over and over again. Private gains, public losses. And, a key part of how this whole system is managed comes down to this one number, 2 to 2.5%. That's the inflation rate that central banks are actively trying to hit. Now, there are a lot of complex reasons for this, but for you, the result is super simple. Your money is literally designed to lose a little bit of its value every single year. Yeah, it's a feature, not a bug. So, who's paying the price for this stability? Well, the winners are the folks who own assets, stocks, real estate, things that tend to rise with inflation. They can kind of just ride that wave. But the losers? That's pretty much anyone who saves in cash or earns a fixed salary. They just get left behind as their purchasing power quietly erodes. And let's be super clear here. This is not an accident. It's a policy choice, and it has very clear winners and very clear losers. Okay, so if that's the problem with the current rulebook, what would a better one even look like? Well, this brings us to the main idea we're exploring today, a whole new framework called accountability first. And the core idea here is, actually, it's incredibly simple. It's a system that's built on a totally different priority. When things go wrong, the number one job of any government intervention should be to protect ordinary people, not the big risk takers. It's about putting the losses back where they belong, on the people who made the risky bets to begin with. So this whole framework kind of rests on three core pillars, like a stool. First, protect everyday people from those hidden losses we talked about. Second, make sure the losses actually stick to the people who took the risks. And third, create real stability, but without constantly playing favorites and bailing out the same big players over and over again. So how would this actually work in practice? Well, the new rules pretty much flip the script. First off, the owners of a failing bank, the equity holders, they get wiped out. Their money, gone. Then, the big, unsecured lenders who bankrolled them, they get bailed in. Now, what that means is their loans basically get turned into ownership of the failing bank. They don't get a big check from the government. And the safety net, it gets moved. It's there to protect small depositors, us, not the huge speculative positions.
Now look, anytime you start talking about letting big institutions fail and letting risk takers actually lose their money, it brings up some totally legitimate fears. I mean, is this just a recipe for total chaos? Let's tackle those fears head on.
And here's the big one, right? The fear of a so-called deflationary spiral. The argument goes something like this. If people expect prices to fall, even just a little bit, won't everybody just stop spending? Won't they just hoard their money and bring the entire economy to a grinding halt? But the reality is just a lot more practical than that. Think about it. We buy stuff because we need it. Your roof starts leaking, your car breaks down, your kids need new shoes for school. Most of your spending is driven by real life and your income, not by you trying to time like a 1% price drop over the next year.
Okay, so what about the next big fear? If we stop doing bailouts, won't the entire financial system just collapse into a black hole? I mean, that's a genuinely terrifying thought.
And this really gets to the most important mindset shift of all. We've all been taught that saving the system means saving the big banks. But this accountability first idea completely redefines that. It means saving the functions of the system. Think of it like the plumbing. It means making sure the payment networks keep running and that your small deposits are safe while letting the specific company that failed get restructured or go under. It's about protecting the plumbing, not the players. So, as we start to wrap this up, how can we actually use these ideas? Well, this whole framework gives us a new tool. It's a simple but really powerful test we can apply to pretty much any financial policy we hear about. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about just flipping a switch overnight and causing chaos. Not at all. The transition has to be gradual. It starts with clarifying the rules, updating the laws so there's zero confusion about who loses money when a big institution fails. And it means setting up the machinery to handle a big bank failure smoothly and quickly, before a crisis actually hits. You build the fire station before the fire starts. This next quote just nails the whole argument in a nutshell. Stabilization without accountability becomes extraction. In other words, if you only have stabilization, you get a system that just quietly siphons off wealth. On the other hand, accountability without safeguards becomes chaos. You get the picture. For real, durable prosperity, you've got to design a system that has both. And that brings us right to our final takeaway. It's a simple one-line question you can use to cut through all the noise you hear in financial news. The next time you hear about some new regulation or another bailout, just ask yourself this one thing. Does this policy protect the public's trust by making sure risk takers actually face the consequences, or does it protect the risk takers from the consequences? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about whether we're building a fairer system or just papering over the same old cracks.